True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. It seems like it has been forever since I've done a live and been with you all. Been a hectic time. I hope that you all are having an amazing new year so far. We're going to get right into this, though. We're going to be discussing Sebastian Rogers. For you all that might be new to the channel, we cuss and discuss crime. I love everyone to have a take. I'm going to have a take. My takes are through a law enforcement lens, certainly. And I always like to hear what each of you think as well. So please be sure to say what you have to say in the chat and leave any comments you want. I look at all of it. But let's get started. Sebastian Rogers disappeared, I should say, went missing in February 26th of last year, 2024. He was only 15 years old. On December 7th, he turned 16, so he's 16 now, but went missing at 15 from Hendersonville, Tennessee. He was in the home with his biological mother and purportedly went to bed at about last heard, if you will, was a thud from his room at about 10 o'clock at night by his mom. Kind of mixed reporting from her as to exactly what happened, what she said. But the last reporting was on Nancy Grace, where she essentially said, hey, keep it down in there. That was it. So in any event, here we are. And we're coming up on almost a year since Sebastian went missing. And just 2 days ago, the Lorelodge had a person named Steve Fisher on his channel. Now, a little bit about the Lorelodge. I had not heard of this channel, and I'm so glad I discovered it. They're not exactly a true crime channel, but they have the same sort of vibe as Kendall Ray in true crime. She's such a great storyteller. She does an amazing job with her facts. She has a huge fact-checking staff. Been fortunate enough to be on with her and actually go visit her in Denver. She's an amazing, gives amazing long-form accounts of different cases and does a good job. And that's sort of how Lorelodge is. He has a huge platform, big following. And he and Steve Fisher had sort of been getting into it on Twitter X, right? Just into it. I mean, Lorelodge has the stance that Katie Proudfoot and Chris Proudfoot are in some way responsible for Sebastian going missing. And I don't just mean not hearing him go out the door, but he thinks it's more involved with that than that. And of course, Steve Fisher has very adamantly said, no, he walked away. That was up until really this interview, but we're going to get more into that. This, as all of you who follow me know, my vibe is not about putting down other creators. That's not what I do here, or even other people necessarily. I definitely advocate for justice for people that I believe have been charged and have possibly committed crimes. Certainly going to advocate for the victims of those individuals. So on this platform, it's not about going after creators or others in our space. It is about facts. And this is going to be about Sebastian Rogers. But we learned a lot, I think, on the Lorelodge interview of Steve Fisher. So we're going to get after it right now. The first thing we really learned was it was very unclear, the relationship between the Proudfoots and Steve Fisher. He made it very clear that he was in their court and sort of representing them, but it was kind of nebulous. Well, Lorelodge, he got down to it. He made it very clear in his questioning. And even though it took a little while with a little bit of beating around the bushes, this is what Stephen Fisher says. He says that he didn't really seek them out, although he says he was working somewhere else in Tennessee regarding, actually it was in Nashville, and that he decided to go down to Hendersonville because he wanted to see what it looked like. So that was what he said he did. And he said he made a few calls to Chris Proudfoot and arranged to meet with Chris Proudfoot, that he went into his home and was establishing this relationship. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, according to Steve Fisher, he is a private eye, licensed in certain states. And he, over the last few years, he talks about it all the time. He takes classes and considers himself a search and rescue person. So what it seemed like from his description of what happened was basically he was kind of hoping to get a client. Nothing wrong with that. And he landed Chris Proudfoot and Katie Proudfoot. He was paid, he said, $15,000. I found that very interesting too. And I'm going to tell you why. I work with a lot of PIs, as you can imagine. Many FBI agents, not me, but others, they love to continue investigating once they retire, investigating from that standpoint, working for different clients and doing investigations. And that's why I always say, and I'm going to try not to take too much of a diversion here, but when anybody is looking for a PI, I always say, please contact me via DM on Twitter, please, because I have a whole cadre of different retired FBI agents. Why do I trust them? I trust them because they have in their area, they're going to have amazing relationship with local and state and different authorities there that you're not going to find with somebody on Twitter who says that they find missing kids. I'm not just talking about Steve. I'm talking about anybody. They have true credentials. The other thing is most of them have 25 plus years of conducting investigations. So this isn't something they've done for a couple of years or all of a sudden decided they wanted to do. This is something they've been trained at the FBI Academy and have received so much training on top of that because we're required to, and then they've done the job. So that's another reason why I really tout them. The other thing is, they are responsible fiduciarily for your money, and they know it. No one in the FBI gets in the FBI to be rich or to make money. You start out, I could look now, but it's probably around $55,000. That's what it was when I left as a starting agent. You're not going to make any money. You get a big raise after about when you get what they call your 13. And then other than that, that's it. You're in it because you believe in what you're doing. You truly believe in helping. I mean, it's your way, it's your contribution. So I didn't want to divert too much, but I did want to make a plug for if anybody's looking for somebody that's reliable and responsible, please either reach out to me and I can give you a whole list of them depending on your area to help you with your need and vouch for them. But in any event, he takes a $15,000 retainer. That's a big retainer. It's much more than any retainer I've really heard of. I know he's across the country. He's in California for some people, but typically a reasonable retainer amount is usually about $5,000. He also said that he's charging $2,200 a day. So you can imagine how quickly a retainer like that would disappear. So we don't know how much in total the Proudfoots have paid him. We know $15,000 for sure. All I'm saying, that's a half a car. That's multiple mortgage payments. This isn't a small time, situation, monetary situation. The other thing with each of these points I make, I'm going to say, why is this important to finding Sebastian? But let me reiterate over that, according to Steve Fisher, he says that he's really not working for the Proudfoots. And in fact, he was hesitant as to who paid him. It was all kind of weird. But he said he's really working for Sebastian. I thought that was very interesting since Sebastian has been gone for 11 months. He's not working for Sebastian. He's being paid by Chris and Katie Proudfoot. And as someone who, or anyone, including me, whenever you have a client that is paying you, yes, you are paid to find facts, but you're paid to in a sense, look out for their interests. And if you can't, I don't think, morally take the job. So to me, you must believe in their position, is what I'm saying. And if a situation occurs, that you find facts and you cannot anymore support their position, you need to fade out. That's my belief in doing anything, whether it's PI work or whether it's expert witness work. Having said that, why is this important? This is important because we have seen now for months, by the way, he signed the agreement November 14th, but we know he's been involved with the Proudfoots far before that because he went down when he was working on Riley Strain. So that's when he took the diversion and first started calling Chris Proudfoot and first met with him and all of that. So we know they've been involved for a long time. And I think this is important because when you're going to gauge the veracity of somebody providing information about a case, it's important to know, are they paid by anyone? Does anyone have a foothold, if you will, on their, their narrative? Is anybody paying for them to represent them? So I think it is important. Although, to be fair, Steve Fisher says if he finds anything that ends up pointing in the direction of Chris or Katie Proudfoot, he will immediately go to authorities and report it. So he says, despite the money he receives, he is not biased and he represents Sebastian's interests. So I want to put out there what Steve Fisher said in conjunction with the facts known in terms of the money. All right. Another really important point, I believe, that Steve Fisher talks about is video footage. Now, we've known about this for a while, over 100 hours. He actually stressed that, I think, 3 times, but over 100 hours, so that he, as far as we know, has a lot of video coverage from the various Ring cameras and other video that was in the area. I think this is really, really important because he says, from looking at this video, he and what he describes as an analyst, that they indeed have seen a person that they have not been able to identify. He further says, if we are to believe him, that, and I believe this part of what he said, you can very much tell when he's telling the truth and being forthright. He very succinctly will talk about something. When he's not, it's like a pinball machine, whoa, reel it in. This is yes or no. But he specifically says that there's somebody on there that it took 4 times to watch because of the graininess of the video to identify that it was even a person, that there was a person there. And I think this is probably really so very important. I believe law enforcement has it, and I believe it could be Sebastian, and possibly why we see on all the flyers, why we know from the beginning of the investigation, why the FBI has said it, that he disappeared on the 26th. Are they relying on this particular video? Recall that they live in an area that doesn't allow light pollution. Now, I don't know if any of you all have ever lived in an area like that. I have. Not only growing up on a farm, the reason you don't have much light pollution on a farm is because you don't have houses for miles. And so you don't have light sources for miles. But I'm talking about neighborhoods where they discourage and in fact fine for lights. The rules are when it becomes dark, you can't have on your lights, your porch lights, you can't have floodlights on. It's done. You can't have it on. And that's a neighborhood that I lived in for a very long time. And it's really cool, I have to say, not to digress again, because the stars blanket you. They're always there blanketing you, but you can't see them with all the light pollution that exists. And it's really special when you're in an area that has no light. So having said that, there was a waning gibbous, meaning the moon. The moon was in waning gibbous mode, which is pretty much a full moon. Waning gibbuses are typically about 98% as they start to wane. So this is very interesting because, of course, there would be some light. And the reason that I say that they're able to pick up anything at all is because there was a waning gibbous. And that's likely why they were able to, even though very faintly, make out that there was a person there. Recall that cameras, light is so important for a camera to properly function and define what that camera is seeing. And the less light, the less defined whatever you're looking at is. And that's why, and we're going to talk about the light video, that's why in many of the footage, much of the footage that we have seen, other than Texas Roadhouse, where it's nice and light, it's hard to make a lot of things out. But he has this footage, and that's why the significance, I think, is important, because he says he has it. I believe he has it. And the most important thing that I think he talked about that I believed was this person that was spotted. He goes on to say, though, which I find very, to me, it was just concerning. And that was Lorelodge asked, hey, listen, can you release part of that? Can we see part of that? Maybe we can make something more out. Maybe somebody else more technical can even do a better job with defining it. We obviously know the Secret Service, the FBI, the FBI's CART team, all these teams have been involved in looking at this video. And I guarantee you, they have it able to see what is at all possible to be seen. I've seen these guys, when I would send in video for license tags that you couldn't see in the dark, all of a sudden they'd send it back to me and whew, there's my tag, there's my plate number. They are amazing with what they can do. And the Secret Service has the same technology. And in some cases, they have a particular machine that is, I don't believe the Bureau even has, last I knew. So in any event, you can bet that the footage that the Bureau and law enforcement, Secret Service has is the best of the best. But why is it even important for us to see it? There's no obligation for the public to really be able to see anything. And by the way, there's no obligation for Steve Fisher to be able to see anything. And I found it interesting, sort of the pedestal that he sort of put himself on, that I can see it, but no, I could hurt the investigation. Well, you just said what you saw that was on it. And how are you going to hurt the investigation? We already know the film that has been seen. And, unless you can make out a particular face or name or license tag or something like that, I just found the whole reasoning, and I particularly found it confusing personally, because Steve Fisher has said Sebastian Rogers left the residence. Well, if Sebastian Rogers left the residence, why in the world is this a case? Why in the world is this nefarious? I don't agree with that position. I've stated this very clearly from the get-go, that I believe no matter what, this is a crime and a criminal investigation, because I don't believe Sebastian Rogers made it out of that neighborhood without the assistance of someone. And that makes it exactly what they changed it to, from an endangered person being missing to a Amber Alert. And that signifies being taken. And whenever you have that, that means that there is criminal conduct likely afoot. And even though I know law enforcement, I've seen so many statements, and I've gone into this on other lives, so I won't go into them, because on those lives I say the dates and I say, the newscast that I refer to. But they've danced around it a little bit, right? It's confusing sometimes whether they just mean there's no criminal conduct, or they haven't seen anything regarding the parents, or whether they just don't think there's anything. And recall, they haven't given any statements other than to say Green Hoodie wasn't involved since clear back in April. So you can bet there's much more investigation they've done from April to today. that they have information on, but they remain radio silent, certainly, and that's good. They're doing their job, and we, the public, don't have to know. But I hope if they have anything that they think we could help with, that they certainly would release that. And so anyway, that was another important point that was gleaned from the Lorelodge interview. This was a point that I agreed with Steve Fisher about. He talks about in his experience, kind of trips right there, because I think he wanted to say vast experience, but his experience is minimal in the scheme of people who have been searching on search and rescue or in law enforcement for decades. But nevertheless, he says something I agree with, and that is that, and Lorelodge gives a couple of indications or examples, I should say, and that is that you can search an area with the highest quality drones, with high quality equipment, with people who have a lot of experience in investigation and in searching, and not find what you're looking for. Lorelodge references the John Benet Ramsey case, where I believe there were 4 searches by law enforcement and others looking for her, and she was never found until the father found her, which Brian Laundrie, same thing. I found it very interesting that millions of dollars was spent, hundreds and hundreds of people, and thousands of man hours, and all the equipment that you could possibly throw at a case. And I believe it was 5 weeks, and law enforcement said he's not there. And we're going to look, we're going to conduct our investigations from an intelligence-led effort. And they left, and they opened up the park, and within about an hour, the Laundrie parents found Brian Laundrie after all that searching. So to the point of both Lorelodge and Steve Fisher and me, and probably many of you, know that things can get missed. They can get overlooked. And this is a huge area with acres and acres that have been covered and searched relentlessly, with state-of-the-art equipment and people, but he could have been missed. It's just a fact, if he were there. Now I'm going to get to why I think it's ludicrous to think that he walked some long distance into the woods in the middle of the night in freezing cold temperatures. When I say freezing cold, that's an expression. You guys can go look for yourself. I've gotten in trouble for pinning down the exact temperature, but to my understanding, it was in the 50s and 60s that evening when they were eating at the Texas Roadhouse, but it tipped clear down into the 30s, low 30s by that evening. I mean, this is February in Tennessee, after all. And that he would walk off barefooted into the woods with varmints, animals, snakes, fire ants, which we know he had a bad experience with, and go hide in a cave there. Fisher actually throws this out as a possibility. Nothing can be really taken off, I suppose, but I look at what's probable and what's possible. It's very improbable that, other than somebody putting him there, in my opinion, that he would have walked miles barefoot in these freezing conditions without a coat, with only this little keychain flashlight and no light, and disappeared into the woods. I also found it interesting that a search and rescue person is terrified of and claustrophobic of small places. That to me is just an oxymoron, because where do you look for missing peoples? In tunnels, in caves, where they could be secreted, where they could be hidden. So I found it interesting that you would want to get involved in search and rescue if you can't search and rescue in confined places. But that's neither here nor there. I'm sorry. That was just something that jumped out at me. Maybe it won't for you. Again, I'm not trying to bash. I'm just kind of trying to highlight some of the more interesting points and trying to stay focused, though, on how this aids or hurts, that or not hurts, but provides information regarding Sebastian. So again, I agree with his point that he might not be found and could be close. He says within 0.7 miles. He has some statistics. He also said that 50% of all autistic people wander off before the age of 18. I haven't seen that statistic, but it's certainly true that autistic children do often leave and go toward water and are often found in water. I mean, if you look at my Twitter, sadly, it's case after case after case of autistic people who have done just that and disappeared and been found in water. But I did think his point there was an important one to at least consider. Another important point verified that we've verified before, I had on a dog handler. Fortunately, she's become so controversial. It's so amazing that there's no controversy, I don't think, at all regarding the fact that she has multiple canines, that she's in the military, and that she trains canines. But certainly everything she's done, everything she said has been nitpicked to death. I truly feel sorry for her. I had her on. I researched and received every copy of all of her certifications before I had her on. Also verified she was in the military, verified her rank, and I believe she is a canine handler who is well trained in canine handling. And we went over the fact that there was no dog that picked up precisely the scent of Sebastian Rogers that then went to the construction site. So this has been a long time ago. And then on Twitter, I've discussed it. In any event, and on lives, there is no confirmed scent of Sebastian Rogers leaving the house by a dog. Okay, just for our consideration. That's just the way it is. And in fact, according to Steve Fisher, Max, who hit on the construction site and on the retention pond and jumped in, that dog was, in fact, according to Steve Fisher, picked up in a car and driven to the construction site. You know, that's what Steve Fisher said. I specifically listened to the body-worn camera coverage, and you can hear this officer just panting, running, trying to follow Max to the construction site. Maybe it was another dog, but the bottom line is, the point that's relevant is that no dog following Sebastian's specific scent has followed him anywhere. There have been scent dogs that have followed the scent of humans, people, to the construction site, which I find interesting, very interesting, and to other places, but not the scent of Sebastian. Okay. And Steve Fisher confirmed that. Let's talk a little bit about the lights, the light video, the flashlight video. We're going to talk, I'm on tonight with Mob Crew. I'm very excited to talk tonight on there and really engage. Why do I like Mob Crew's channel? I'm just going to give him a plug here. I like Mob Crew's channel because, first of all, I think he's genuine. I really do. I think he cares. I can hear it in his voice. I see it in his eyes, and I see it in his work. And I think it's rare to find on YouTube. It's really not that rare. You just have to look for people who are really trying to do this right, and not be, tragedy pimps. I don't even understand why some people have a platform when they're felons and have horrible backgrounds and they have no idea what they're talking about. They have no training, but they love to talk, and they love to talk terrible about a lot of different people. And I like Mob Crew because that's not his vibe at all. Does he, get irritated sometimes and say things sometimes? Of course, we all do. We all get irritated and maybe throw in a little jab. But his work on this case has really been second to none. And I look forward to going on his channel tonight. We're going to talk about the light video there, but I just want to say this because, again, we're focused in on what happened with Lorelodge and Stephen Fisher, what was discussed, and they discussed those lights. And Stephen Fisher, for the first time, at least that I know of, made it crystal clear that he also doesn't believe it's trash trucks. Now, that wasn't what I was hearing from him before. Now he has a whole line of belief that we are seeing actually one flashlight, not two, and that the one flashlight is a neighbor that is moving a trash can. I don't believe that. I don't believe it a bit. And I don't believe that because I've seen too much analytics regarding where the lights are, the flashlights, and they're over by Sebastian's house. The house he's referring to with this trash movement is off camera. So I don't believe that. And I'm not sure I really believe that one light is fixed because I see it move. There's another light that Fisher may be referring to that I do think is a house light on the house that's to the far right as you're facing Sebastian's house. But you see a light move and then you see another light on screen and then move. Could that be because of the vantage of the camera? Well, no, it really can't if that camera is a fixed camera that's taking this. And we have no information that this was a moving camera. In fact, according to Steve Fisher, the cameras are antiquated from the standpoint that they're standalones. And I could tell you from collecting hundreds and hundreds of videos over my career, they're not the best quality. They do the best they can, but they end up being grainy and they're far away. And so in any event, I just wanted to say that Fisher now says it is a light, but it's somebody moving a trash can up the road. We'll get into more of that with Mob Crew, but I just wanted to say that Steve Fisher is now at least agreeing that one is a flashlight. So that his whole vibe has changed on the flashlight video. You'll have to listen to it. You'll hear him. It's a little bouncy, but that's what I ascertained. It's not a garbage truck. In fact, he says that, I think his exact words are, well, I'm not going to say exact words, I'm paraphrasing, but that law enforcement told the parents to say that. Okay, I believe that's on that video. All right. But let's get in, and I think this is very important. What does Steve Fisher say about his information from law enforcement and about law enforcement contacting him? This is important, and I'll tell you why. So I'm going to do this in reverse. I'm going to say why it's important, why we even need to talk about it, and then I'm going to say what he said. The reason it's important is if we're getting information from somebody who is directly getting information from law enforcement, then that person can have important information that would be important to our understanding as to what happened to Sebastian Rogers. So I think it is important to know whether a PI is involved with law enforcement, if they're getting their information from them. You'll have to watch this. But initially that question is asked, and initially he says, yeah, they contacted me. And then Mob Crew dials down. I love how Mob Crew interviews. It's subtle, but I'm telling you, he dialed down. And he said, okay, well, exactly who? Like, is it Sumner County? Is it TBI? Who is it? And what it ends up being, what he says anyway, when you pare it all down, you're going to have to watch a lot of it. I've watched it twice, and then I've rewatched several parts more than once, trying to dial down. But he ends up saying that it's actually somebody in search and rescue that contacted him. But then he says, but search and rescue is law enforcement. But it wasn't law enforcement, but it was search and rescue. And then he says, because when all of this happens, and you're searching all this time and you're not coming up with anything, that they bounce what they found off each other, different search and rescue teams. So that was what all this time we've been hearing Fisher say and others say on behalf of Fisher, that he has this contact, direct contact with law enforcement, and he's been talking to him and they've talked to him. Even at the beginning of the video, he said, quote, "They contacted me." And I believe that is a direct quote. And then he changes, but that's why this is important. If somebody truly is getting information from law enforcement, I find that to be I want to listen to that a little bit more. But now we know Steve Fisher is not getting information from law enforcement, not at all. He ultimately, after a long time, when you listen, he makes that clear. No, I'm not getting any information. They're locked down. They're not communicating with me. He says, I'm not communicating with them. I don't need to communicate with them. I'm running my own investigation. He's doing his own investigation. So anyway, that's why that piece to me was important. Moving along. This was so disconcerting. So disconcerting. He says that according to his interview with the neighbor, and he says he interviewed all these neighbors, he says that the neighbor told him, the one across the street that has the advantage of seeing Sebastian's front door, that law enforcement never got his video. For me, that was a jaw-dropping moment, coming from the vantage of law enforcement and having looked for kids and having, last case I worked on, being an autistic child. That's the first thing you do. You got to have everybody do the canvas, send teams of 2 out to every house, ask them to search, get permission, and then get their footage of whatever video footage they may have. That's just law enforcement 101. And that purportedly, according to Steve Fisher, 10 days later, I think it was 10 days later, the homeowner was afraid it was going to start to ride over, and he gave the entire hard drive over to law enforcement. This is why this is important. And again, I don't want a Monday morning quarterback. There's nothing harder than working on these cases. It's terrible. You have to completely compartmentalize, or you'll just go home and cry every night when you see the things you see, especially, at least in my case, when it came to children. And it's hard. And you're exhausted, and you're missing time with your family, and you're doing it all because you want to find that child. You're invested. And to hear that whoever was in charge, Sumner County, didn't immediately get video footage from all of these homes, even if you think you knew what you knew. Jaw-dropping for me. And the reason that's important is, and again, I know how hard they're working. It makes me worry. What else have they dropped the ball on? Because that's dropping the ball. That's my opinion. If we're to believe Steve Fisher, and if we're to believe the neighbor, so unless Steve Fisher is bastardizing what happened, law enforcement didn't get that video, and that's big. Okay. Let's see. Okay. He was asked a lot about Seth. And the piece that I thought was very interesting, that Lorelodge got totally dialed down on, was Seth. Because he was trying to figure out, could Seth have been there? Was Seth at work? Now, I know the answer. I know he was at work because I've seen the timesheets. And I think many people have now. They're out. But Steve Fisher says, quote, I think I read it verbatim, "I never said Seth was not accounted for." So this became clear to me that despite that camp, if you will, and we really got to get rid of these camps. It should just be Team Sebastian. We got to get rid of the camps. But people from the side of the fence that are pointing the finger at Seth, which I find mind-boggling because of the alibi situation. he says he's accounted for, that he doesn't think Seth did it because his whereabouts are accounted for. That's what Fish said. See, Fisher said that. So now we know that all the BS that we hear over on that side with all these creators and, all these accounts, that Seth wasn't accounted for and all this baloney is baloney. At least if we're to believe someone in that camp that is sort of pushing forward a narrative that Seth was somehow involved. That was a big moment. You can find it. It's toward the end. I didn't write the timestamp down. It's definitely toward the end. I mean, they talk about it and then they get sidetracked and then they go back to it. And then that's when he says, I believe Seth was accounted for. All right, moving right along. Let's see. Okay. The vehicles, and this is really, really important. From my understanding, from everything I've read from law enforcement, from everything that I have been privy to, those vehicles are indeed accounted for. In other words, every vehicle that was in that area belonged in that area in one shape or another. Either they were cars that belonged to neighbors, or they were individuals that are often in the neighborhood, go in and out of the neighborhood, and have been accounted for. That's my understanding when it comes to the vehicles. I do want to have a good conversation tonight with Mob Crew. He's done a lot of investigation into that particular area. I didn't focus a lot of my time on that area because that has been my understanding, that the vehicle, in other words, what do I think possibly happened is whatever vehicle he was taken to or he got out of there was at the construction site. I think that's very plausible. But do I think a car pulled up and they jumped in the car? No. Another point on this that Steve Fisher says is he talks about, could it have been a game of tag? Could a child, somebody he knew from school, gotten his confidence? Again, we heard him say that Katie Proudfoot told him that what would lure Sebastian out of the house. And I thought this was a very important point he makes in the interview. And he says, friends, a friend, that he was desperate for friends, that he wanted to be accepted. I mean, everybody knows that follows me. I have a special needs brother. As just anybody who picks on, ignores, hurts, alienates, just have zero patience for. So in listening to that, it just broke my heart that is something that would lure him out, somebody wanting to be a friend. Could that have happened? I think it's possible. What I don't think happened was what Fisher went on to say, and they could have been playing flashlight tag. And I don't believe that he went out and was just playing flashlight tag. There's no information about that. You can barely get him or some people to even understand that those were flashlights and not garbage trucks. Now people are coming around to that. But in any event, I don't think somebody showed up to play flashlight tag. Could that have been a lure? Somebody that he was interacting with, because I've always said from the beginning, I know everybody said he didn't have an online presence, but you just don't know what your kids are doing. He's highly functioning. And at school, you have electronics you can use, you can have computers you can use, and you can borrow somebody else's phone. You can say, hey, listen, my parents won't let me, but will you? There's all sorts of ways that you can make contact with an online predator or somebody that could have lured him. So I definitely don't completely toss that out. Not completely. Again, it's possibilities versus probabilities. And I have to say that is a possibility. So I do believe that's something that needs to be considered. Let me see. I'm moving right along. Okay. According to Steve Fisher, he says unequivocally, Chris Proudfoot was in Memphis. He said law enforcement has all that information. He knows where his phone was. He knows where his car was. He absolutely unequivocally says that to his knowledge, Chris Proudfoot was in Memphis. But Lorelodge sneaks in a good question. And he says, has law enforcement said that? And he says, no, very quickly. No, I don't know that from law enforcement. So again, of course, this is supposition. And he says, if law enforcement thought he wasn't there, he'd be, I can't remember what he said, but something like toast. He'd be crushed. He'd be taken in, basically. And of course, that's not true. Just because you have somebody in a lie, I mean, look at the Summer Wells case. There were more lies than I could shake a stick at from the Wells parents. Look at this case. Look at all these lies. I mean, again, many, but you don't see an arrest yet. So just because a parent lies doesn't necessarily mean that they're responsible for their child missing. They can be lying for other reasons. We know that there is child abuse in this case. Chris Proudfoot's admitted that. They got into a lot of that with Lorelodge. I'll just suffice it to say, we know that Chris Proudfoot has admitted to 2 beatings of Sebastian Rogers with a belt. He describes them as like a one-hit. I don't really believe any of that. I just think that when you punish a child who is autistic, for heaven's sakes, first of all, that's not legal in Tennessee. People said corporal punishment, not using a belt, a weapon against an autistic child. Look it up. I don't have it memorized, but please look that up. That's an issue. So they got into that and back and forth, and essentially Steve Fisher would not cop to anything other than he doesn't believe in corporal punishment himself, and he didn't think it was right, but he never threw Chris Proudfoot under the bus. Really quick, I have to take a quick pause, and then I'm going to get back to this to identify my new sponsor, which I am very excited about. And the reason I'm excited about it is I never thought anything like this would happen, especially with a product that I could fully endorse. It's called Aura. And what it is, it's AURA. I have the screenshot there on my screen for any of you that might be interested. But it completely protects you. It's ID protection. It protects you from scam calls, VPN. It puts a credit lock. It's ID protector for all your devices. If you're interested, if you're looking into that, I can highly recommend Aura. But back to the case. The belt. I will always be bothered by that. And I was always wonder if, because I believe Chris Proudfoot has lied, is lying, is not being fully truthful about many things. And I think Katie has also been deceptive. Does it have really to do with this issue with child abuse? Something that has to be considered, not just that he's responsible for Sebastian going missing. We don't know that yet. Let me see. I've just got a few more points. Let's see. Almost done. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Something that Steve Fisher brought up that I thought was very important was talking about thermal imaging drones. To me, thermal imaging anything. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that you can decipher even through concrete. And we saw this in the Rex Heuermann case, for those of you who followed that case, the Long Island serial killer / Gilgo Beach killer. You can see through concrete and through ground and everything. And I do believe that it would be important to employ these devices. If they've been employed, we don't know about it. I thought it was very interesting that Steve Fisher, I believe, said he doesn't know how to use them. That's not what he does. But then early on, when he says, when he's considering how much to charge, he said, well, it depends on whether I need to use my thermal imaging drone. So I got completely confused whether he does that or doesn't do that. I'm assuming he doesn't do that from his statement where he said, I believe he doesn't do that, but it would be important, because if he did do that, he would be doing that. But nevertheless, I agreed with the point that it would be good for that to be done. Let me make sure I don't miss anything. I've got about 4 more tick marks here. Let's see. Taking the trash out. I believe that has been verified. I say that because there's an image that takes the trash out, and unless it's Katie, it just doesn't make sense that it's anybody else but Sebastian. So while I don't think his face and everything can be fully made out, I think that he took the trash out. All right. Let's see. I think I'm almost done. Oh. Okay. Final note, and this I think is hugely important. And if you haven't watched this interview, please watch it yourself. Don't, these are my reflections of what I perceived as a law enforcement officer conducting an interview, watching an interview. I love to break down these interviews. It's like when Jennifer Soto was interviewed, just from that vantage point. But one thing Stephen Fisher said that I found very interesting at the end, and you can watch it for yourself. He basically says, listen, nothing's off the table. He doesn't say that he thinks the Proudfoots are involved, but he also doesn't say he doesn't think they aren't. It's just very odd to me how Lorelodge sort of lulled him into that possibility and him not taking it off the table. So I thought that was very interesting. Please watch it yourselves. Because Stephen Fisher, how he provides answers, they're not direct and it's very convoluted. You almost have to watch the whole thing because they go in and out of the questions and the answers. As much as Lorelodge tries to nail it down, it takes a long time to get some of these answers nailed down, and they kind of bleep in and out throughout the interview. But I think I hit on the most important points. I think there were a lot of points that were made in that interview that were important for us, for understanding where we are in the investigation, where things are looking, because law enforcement isn't going to tell us, at least not right now. They're definitely taking the FBI approach, which I think it's the best approach. Don't say anything unless you do need help. In other words, if you have images, if you have pictures, if you can give time frame, if you can give car descriptions. I loved how the Idaho case was run in that respect. They were great about saying, listen, these people are off the table. These people are not at all subjects. In fact, they're cleared. I loved how every week we would see a cleared list. I loved how they would say, listen, this is the car we want, or this is the area we were looking at. Did you see anything? They were fabulous. I wish that would happen here, because I do believe they have so much information, and I do believe the public could possibly be more helpful in this situation. Somebody saw something. He didn't disappear into thin air. Who took him? I don't know. We'll talk more tonight on with Mob Crew, but for all of you who took time today, thank you for being here. I really, really enjoy your comments. I'm going to take a look at them, and until 7 o'clock tonight, may justice be served for Sebastian Rogers.